Good day, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages. We're looking at non-essential versus essential phrases and how you punctuate them. Why should I care? Well, again, I've said over and over again, you're probably not going to be drinking martinis with someone 5 years from now and going, that was a great non-essential phrase that you used, and I'm sure in your head you offset them with commas. But why you should care is because your writing and how it looks depends upon understanding what is essential and what is non-essential. So, what makes it essential or non-essential? First of all, essential means it needs to be there. It's simple as that. The sentence would be vague or uncertain, or it wouldn't make any sense if that particular phrase or clause was not there. You also hear, especially when we're talking about adjective clauses, the term restrict or restrictive. And simply what that means is it restricts or limits what the noun could be. So if I said the cat that meows all night did something, we know that it could only be that cat. That cat right there. You could point to that cat and say, that's the cat that meows all night. You could say the same thing. The student that sits in the front, right? We know that's that student specifically that sits in the front. If we just said the student, we wouldn't know, or the cat, we wouldn't know what it is. So what adjective clauses do is they restrict that person. In other words, they say, hey, this is the person, only that person. And so what essential nouns do is they clarify or specifies what the noun that they modify could be. Non-essentials ones, they just don't need to be there. The sentence remains specific without it there. We know who or whom we are talking about when we read the sentence without that without that non-essential information there. Now there's this additional information, it's bonus information, it's fluff, and it has no bearing on the rest of the sentence. In other words, it does not restrict the noun that it's referring to. So again, why should I care? If it's essential, no commas. If it's non-essential or restrictive, you need to have offsetting commas. And what offsetting commas mean is there's a comma where the before the phrase or clause begins, and there is a comma or sometimes a period, right? So offsetting punctuation when that phrase ends. So offsetting, you know how you do air quotes with your fingers? Well, if you just use one finger, those are offsetting commas. One comma, another comma. There are four categories that we're going to look at for essential and non-essential clauses and phrases. The first one is an adjective clause. And what adjective clauses do, they have a subject and a verb, and they modify a noun. We looked at these quite a bit, especially when we were reading the novel We Are Okay. And she uses quite a few of these adjective clauses to really spice up what would normally be kind of a simple sentence. Appositive phrases, we went into depth on that last 2 weeks. And again, a positive phrase is a noun that renames the noun before it. Keep in mind what a lot of you did is you put the subject as the appositive. The subject will never be the appositive. The appositive appears after whatever noun it is. And so remember, it sits next to, right, or in this case, right after the noun. So positive phrases appear after the noun that it renames. It's different in the rest of these. All these other ones are adjectives. A positive phrase is a noun phrase that renames the noun that's before it. Kind of similar to a pronoun, how a pronoun renames it, except pronoun is different because the antecedent doesn't appear typically in the sentence, or at least in the clause. Prepositional phrases are, in this case, we're looking at adjective prepositional phrases that modify a noun. And then we have participle phrases. Participle phrases, I don't know why I have the and there. That's a mistype there. But they end It should be end, it looks like. They end in ed or ing verbs that modify a noun. Whoops, dang it. So, adjective clauses are like all clauses have a subject and a verb, and they modify a noun. In other words, they go with a noun and they change it. You can identify adjective clauses because it often has a relative pronoun that goes with it. The following relative pronouns, the most popular ones are that, which, who, whose, and whom, or I call them the three. It's that plus the 4 W's. And really, there's actually 3 more W's that go with it. You can have a where, why, and when as well. And we looked at those in class. For testing purposes, we probably will not get into the where, why, and when adjective clauses, just kind of simplify things. But be aware that they are there and they are potentially going to be on the test. But for our practical purposes right now, we are just focusing on that, which, who, whose, whom, and whom. Adjective clauses can be restrictive or non-restrictive, or essential, in other words, they need to be there, or non-essential, which means they don't need to be there. So when we're talking about restrictive, what it says is it restricts or limits the noun. So we talked about that cat. So when we talk about the cat that meows in the tree all night, it can only be that cat, right? It's that specific one cat. We're not going to be confused by any other cat because it's that cat. You can literally point to them, that cat there, right? If you said the cat which sits in the tree, we don't know which cat. There must be multiple cats that sit in the tree, and it's not specific. It doesn't. In other words, it doesn't limit the cat enough. So when it's restrictive, it specifically identifies the noun. When it's non-restrictive, it doesn't restrict the noun. A good way to check if it's non-restrictive, you could say, can you put this in parentheses or delete it? And is a sentence without the sentence being vague or making the sentence a different sentence? In other words, a different meaning. If you can put it in parentheses or delete it, I would say 99% of the time it's non-restrictive. In other words, you don't need it. So let's look at the examples here. Again, we have the cat that meows every night got run over by a car. And the question you would ask yourself is, do we know what the cat is without the adjective clause? And you would say no. And then if that's the case, it's a restrictive/essential. Because it's restrictive/essential, we do not need commas. Jenna ordered a pepperoni pizza, which she likes more than mushroom pizza. Do we know what kind of pizza she ordered? Yeah, we know what kind of pizza she ordered. So the fact that she likes mushroom pizza has zero effect on the sentence. In other words, it's additional information. It's non-restrictive. We don't need it. So we offset that in commas. So we have the comma after pizza and the comma after pizza and a period after mushroom pizza. 3, my father, who was in Vietnam, loves baseball. So my father's pretty specific, and who was in Vietnam has nothing to do with baseball. And so the question would be, do we know who specifically loves baseball? Yes, we know that it's my father, specific enough, and therefore it's not necessary. So we have offsetting commas, one before father and one after Vietnam. Now, the other two kind of shows a little wrinkle in the system here, and I hope it illustrates a point that you need to pay attention to what the adjective clause modifies. And so, number 4, the waiter who served the salad did not notice the bug in the arugula. Jason, who served the salad, did not notice the bug was in the arugula. So, in example 4, we don't know which waiter it is. So, the fact that we have who served the salad specifies or restricts which waiter it is. It wasn't the waiter who served the wine. It wasn't the waiter who served the ribs. It wasn't the waiter who, brought out your birthday cake and sang happy birthday to you. It was the waiter, only that waiter, who served the salad. So when we switch to Jason, who served the salad, Jason is very specific, so we don't need to know that he served the salad because we already know who Jason is. So Jason being a very specific, or in this case, a proper noun, if we removed who served the salad, it wouldn't change the sentence, right? And we would know who Jason is. We would know who that person was. So we're not going to get into appositives or too much because I spoke, I think, 30-something minutes on my other videos about it. But remember that a positive or a positive phrase renames the noun that is the antecedent that comes before the appositive. So Mr. Breda, my teacher, has long hair. Mr. Breda is the subject. My teacher is the appositive. My teacher is non-essential because Mr. Breda is a very specific proper noun. And so you would know who that is. So you could just say Mr. Breda has long hair. You would already know that he's a teacher, and that would be good enough. Or you at least know who Mr. Breda is. You might not know who Mr. Breda is specifically, but or that he's a teacher. But if you said Mr. Breda, that's specific enough to know that he has long hair. However, you just said my teacher. In this case, my teacher, Mr. Breda, has long hair. My teacher is the teacher is the subject. Mr. Breda is the appositive, right? Renaming teacher. We can assume that you have multiple teachers, and so what's important about this is that Mr. Breda is essential. In other words, we would not know which teacher has the long hair without Mr. Breda there. Again, if it's essential, no commas, non-essential, offsetting commas. Prepositional phrases, for the most part, all adjective phrases are essential. Now, you can write ones that aren't essential, and I'll talk about that in a second. But let's look at the first one. The cat in the tree meows all night. Which cat is it? Man, it's the cat in the tree. It can't be any other cat. It's not the cat on the ground. It's not the cat in the hat. It's not the cat in the box. It's not the cat in the living room. It is the cat in the tree. We hate that cat. We know what cat it is. Why? Because it's the cat in the tree. So that in the tree is really specifying what cat it is. It's restricting cat. So in general, what adjective clauses do is they are very specific and they restrict whatever noun that they are. Are they fluff in the sense that they add additional information? Sure. They're adding additional information. Can they be nouns? I'm sorry. Can they be subjects or direct objects or anything like that? No, they're garbage. All they do is add restrictive information to a noun for the most part. Now you can write ones that are exceptions. There's an exception. I believe this example comes from Grammar 101, the website Grammar 101. My cell phone, in its blue case, seems to vanish into my backpack wherever it rings. I think we can all agree that in my blue case is not relevant here. It doesn't restrict the cell phone. We know whose cell phone it is. It's my cell phone. There's a possessive in front of it. But I would really argue what the author means is my cell phone, which has a blue case, seems to vanish into my backpack. Or I think what they're trying to do here is trying to be poetic, and so they're saying my cell phone in its blue case, which is great for a poem. All right, put that on a different stanza in your free verse poem, and that sounds great. But if we're talking formal writing, I wouldn't say that this is a quality sentence. And I think David Foster Wallace would agree with me. This is kind of a puff. He used to call them puff words or puff sentences, and by that I mean they're puffing up kind of the meaning and trying to look smarter by using kind of a weird sentence structure that's not or a weird word that's not necessary here. Really what the author means is which has a blue case. In its blue case just sounds odd to me. It doesn't sound. It sounds like it's meant for a poem or inverted structure. Sounds like Yoda might be speaking. I don't find the sentence appealing at all. But that's my personal opinion, and I always let you know when it's my personal opinion. You won't see questions like this on your exam. I think it's a waste of your time. So we'll leave it at that and move on. participle phrases, we're going to get into participle phrases and gerunds and infinitives later in more depth. But participle phrases are a class of what's called verbals. And we're going to focus kind of just on some basic kind of stuff and rules for participles right now. Participle phrases modify nouns as adjectives, but they look like an ed or ing verb. In other words, if you said I was skiing down a mountain, bam, that's a verb. And or I was biking down a mountain, I was running down a mountain. Any of those things, that's definitely a verb. However, when you remove that helping verb, was or is or am or something along those lines, one of those to be verbs, the ing, when it has additional information after it, can function as an adjective. So let's look at the two sentences before that. And I get this is confusing. You remember with English, pretty much any word can be used as a different, how should I say, a different part of speech at some point. A good example is which is which, right? So let's look at skiing down the mountain. Mr. Breda fell and broke his leg. So the sentence really is the action. Breda fell, broke leg. All right, that's the sentence. The adjective to this is skiing down the mountain. Now, skiing down the mountain modifies Mr. Breda. So skiing down the mountain, comma, right? The comma will always be there. Why? Because skiing down the mountain is non-essential, right? It's giving a time and place that what happened to Mr. Breda prior to falling and breaking his leg. So you can move these participles into different spots. If you move it directly after the subject, you're going to offset it in commas. So Mr. Breda, skiing down the mountain, fell and broke his leg. We're going to have a comma before skiing and a comma after mountain. And again, what this does is it is a demarcation, or it indicates that, hey, here's the beginning of the participle phrase and the end of the participle phrase. Remember, that's what commas do, is they separate. And what the participle phrase here is doing is it's interrupting. It's interrupting the action here. And so we're going to separate that. Anytime you have an interrupter or something that is non-essential that breaks up the action, so to speak, it is offset in commas. So there are cases when participles are not offset, and that's when they are essential. So the student earning the highest grade will receive the highest award. Now, this comes from Purdue Owl. And again, I got to tell you, I'm not a big fan of this sentence. I think it's awkward. The student earning the highest grade will receive the highest reward. Again, you can do it. It's grammatically correct. Why is it essential? Well, we didn't know what student it was. But I think what they're really trying to say is that the student that earns the highest grade will receive the highest reward. And I think that is more clear. It's less awkward. And again, I think David Foster Wallace would agree with me that if you're going to use this style, it would be used sparingly, and it would be more of a poetic type of style than a formal type of style. All right. We will get more into participles later. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, remember, always text me.